the call should be transitioned. This is consensus layer call 86, and here is the issue 521 on the Ethereum repo. We will focus on the merge as much as there's an appetite for it. Do a little bit of client updates. There's a couple of things that have come up for discussion topics, EpiSub and Builder API, and we'll go from there. Okay, to kick it off, we did have a merge testing call on Monday, I believe. So if there's anything else in addition to what we covered on that call that we'd like to cover today, we can cover it now in the testing section. I know that there was a mainnet shadow fork number 3 today. Does anybody want to fill us in on the details?
Yeah, hey everyone. So we had mainnet shadow fork 3 today. I think we hit TTD around 1 p.m. So pre-TTD, we were at something like 99.8% participation. We were seeing really healthy block production. I think the only issue pre-TTD was sometimes Prism Bezu was missing a couple blocks, proposing a couple of blocks. And I think the Bezu team already had a theory for why that could be, but yet to be triaged. Post-TTD, we were at 97.6%. So the same Prism Bezu that had some issues before was then dropping off the chain post-TTD. A while later, we noticed something with Prism Nethermind as well. Marek was looking into it, but it's also not like a static issue. It like that combination of tested and proposed for a while, then dropped off and I think came back again. But there was also someone looking into it, and there might have already been a fix, so it might just need to be updated. I'm not sure. So all in all, I think it was a great shadow fork. We were almost bugless this time, and we're still seeing really healthy block production. I have like a monitor enabled on Teku. I don't really see any blocks being late, so we're seeing blocks produced on time. Besides that, there was an additional test done this shadow fork. I've just posted the result of that test as well. Essentially what we did was we spun up a couple of nodes. We allowed them to sync up the head. Before TTD, about 1 to 2 hours before, we paused either the CL or the EL to simulate them having to sync. And the moment TTD was hit, we unpaused them. So this is before post-TTD finality. The results were kind of mixed. I think the Prism Geth and Lighthouse Geth combo had some issues syncing up, but Prism Nethermind, Lighthouse Nethermind had no problems. They seem to be synced up perfectly. This is still new, so I don't think any of the client teams have had a time to look into why this happened. But yeah, that's I think the overall status update. Congratulations, everyone.
Thanks, Ferry. Any other comments or questions about the mainnet shadow fork? Great, thanks. Cool. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and I believe some of you are on the call, or at least are aware of some of the discussion last week on the Alcodev call around the difficulty bomb. I just want to do a quick status update and get everyone on the same page there. On the execution side, the proof of work side still, it was discussed as to still attempt to not defuse the bomb, but to revisit this on the next call and the call after, given status with testing, mainnet shadow forks and things like that. I think essentially in May, we need to be either making decisions about forking public testnets and dates around those, or beginning to make a decision about defusing the bomb. Much discussion ensued. Tim, are there any other relevant points from that discussion you want to share here?
No, that's pretty much it. It's like we're in this weird spot between where if everything goes well, we might be able to merge without delaying the bomb. But if we have some delay in the merge, then we'll probably have to. And for everything to go well, we kind of have to start looking at moving to testnets in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any discussion points around that? Obviously, it takes two to tango. If we're having issues on the consensus layer, that would cause the delay in the bomb. If we're having issues on the execution layer, that would as well. So I don't mean to say this decision, because it wasn't necessarily a decision, was made without y'all. It's a kind of we're in this phase in May where we're monitoring whether we're on go or no go to the next testnet phase. Speaking of the next testnet phase, Ropsten, Sepolia, and Gorley are planned to go through the merge. I believe Ropsten is at the beginning of that list, although that might be up for discussion. And to do a Ropsten merge, we have to make a Ropsten beacon chain, or parallel to Ropsten, make a beacon chain. So I think to be prepared for that, and maybe to give that beacon chain at least a couple weeks of activity before doing the merge, we need to have that conversation now. Quick question: is Ropsten to be maintained after going through this fork, or will it be deprecated? I saw in the OG council there was some discussion of deprecating it after the fork, but I hadn't heard of that prior.
I think the idea is we being the client devs would like to no longer maintain it. Not necessarily, the day after the fork, okay, but call it a few months after, to then only have Gordy and Sepolia be the two client maintained long-lived testnets. Yeah, people don't like when we deprecate testnets, so there might be some company that chooses to then maintain Ropsten, but yeah, I guess from our perspective, we don't want the maintenance burden anymore.
Right. So we have two beacon chains to make, one for Ropsten, one for Sepolia, and I think we should make a plan for them. I think primarily our options are low validator count, high validator count, permissioned or unpermissioned. Permissioned, we can use the ERC20 variant of the deposit contract to essentially restrict the set of validators and make it, it's not clique, but clique-like in the sense that there would be very known entities and operators that have validators, or you do the other where you open it up for more public testing. Gorley and Piermont, based off of it, does serve that function, but you could argue for essentially doing that here as well. Does anybody have opinions to share on the value of doing beacon chain structures in one way or the other for either of these testnets?
Just to make sure I understood correctly, Gurley will be unpermissioned, right? Effectively.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't have any opinion on the others then.
Yeah, so I think for Ropsten, I think it might make sense for us to also make it unpermissioned, but for us to have a bunch of the validators, just so that if others want to get in on practicing the transition and running validators, they can do so, but we also don't care if it becomes unstable eventually, because we don't plan on maintaining it. So then the question is on Sepolia, do we want permissioned or unpermissioned, given that Gorley would be kind of the unpermissioned one, in general.
One thing we discussed like a few months ago when we were talking about this is like if we have a permissioned one, it's easier to actually test some like chaotic states, like shutting down half the validators for a week and seeing what happens and things like that. And also, we probably don't want to do stuff like that on a testnet which has a ton of end user applications. Gordy obviously does. So I think it probably makes sense for
Does
Sepolia to be.
Sepolia have a bunch of end user applications?
No, not today.
Okay.
And today basically none. So like I think it might make sense for us to use Sepolia as like a consensus level testnet, and people are obviously free to deploy at it as well. But this way, if we decide we want to shut down validators or part of them for a week or two and see like how the activity leak happens or long periods of non-finalization, I don't think we should do that on Gordy because it affects a lot of people's applications. But Sepolia might be a good fit for that, and then a permission validator set makes it easier to control those things.
Yeah, I think that.
I'd like to add on that point. I do think it makes sense to have Sepolia as permission. In the end, if we use the permission contract, it'll be token gated, so we could still like make it unpermissioned, but people are not using bots to steal like the underlying asset. So people don't have to fight over Sepolia ETH, but rather would fight over whatever token we create. So it might be a bit easier to avoid wasting the base layer testnet tokens.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, permissioned meaning large operators could run validators if they wanted to, and if there was demand for individuals to be able to run a validator or two, we could set up one of those faucets, although those are always ridiculously gamed. Okay, is anybody opposed to keeping validator set on the smaller side, on the order of 16,000, 50,000, something like that, and keeping it permissioned? Okay, and then on Robson, Micah, do you have something?
You mentioned keeping it on the smaller side. Is there any functional difference, like how much money is at stake? Air quotes around the money.
And it affects validator state size and some other parameters. But no, there's not much functional.
Do we want it to be close to mainnet then, if it actually has an impact?
Gorley and Piermont, we have been doing so. We try to keep the validator set size the same as mainnet, so we don't necessarily need that in this other environment. And it's something of a chore to kind of always keep the queue running and make sure that mainnet doesn't sprint past Piermont. So in light of that, I'd say try something different here and not.
I guess the alternative argument is we could have something that's twice the size of mainnet, something that would take a long time to achieve on Trotter. It's just a question of if that brings us anything.
The idea being that we would see a failure there before we see a failure on mainnet if there is a failure related to size.
Exactly. And also people can test their optimizations that are suited for twice the size of mainnet already. Whereas, of course, we can achieve the same thing with Trotter, but it still requires a lot of people making deposits all the time.
Yeah, I'm okay either way. Does anybody feel strongly? And I'm also kind of implicitly assuming that the entities on this call, client teams and otherwise, would help run nodes and validators on this new sustained testnet. Obviously, if I'm incorrect in that assumption, please speak up. Okay. I'm gonna open up. I'll open up an issue about in the PM repo about the 3 beacon chains, Paramount, which already exists, and we'll take over Borley. One to be created for Ropsten, which we can discuss how we want the genesis of that to be, and that will be unpermissioned, and then a permissioned one for Sepolia, which it seems like there's a desire to go for a larger validator set, and we can take that to the issue though. And I do think that we should launch these by the end of May, if not a little bit earlier, to just be primed and ready for.
Oh, I think earlier. Yeah, I think we probably want them launched like in the next 2 to 3 weeks, which is like in late May, but not like 4 weeks from now.
4 weeks from now is in
Too late.
June.
Yeah.
But yeah,
like
in 2 or 3 weeks. Why? I mean, definitely before the end of May. Is there going to be a testnet fork before the end of May?
No, there won't. But I assume you want this thing to be live for more than like a few days before we have. Maybe not. I guess. Yeah, that's essentially just like you maybe want it to be live for more than a couple days.
Right.
And if there's a fork in say June,
yeah. Okay.
We could also do the 2 separately. For example, the Ropsten one, we could have it small, so it's not too much of a task for client teams to spin up nodes, even if it's cost ineffective, and just have that in like 2 weeks from now. Whereas if we want to have Sepolia twice the size of mainnet, I think it might take a bit longer for client teams to find a place to run them. And that could be like 3-4 weeks maybe. And that also kind of follows the order in which we're going to fork the actual testnets. Like Ropsten would happen before Sepolia anyway. So we should have that extra couple of weeks of leeway. It just comes at the cost of coordination, I guess.
Yeah. That all sounds reasonable. And we do have a beacon chain that's been running for a long time, that at least for one of the testnets, if that is an interesting parameter in these testnets, Paramount serves that.
You may want to create 3 separate issues just so we can keep the discussions isolated rather than one issue.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll call it. Well, and I don't think we need to create one for Paramount then, but I'll make an issue for beacon chain for Ropsten and beacon chain for Sepolia. Very cool. Thank you. Anything else on that one? Great. Otherwise, on merge discussions, any technical points people would like to discuss? Any issues they would like insight on how other people are dealing with things? Just in general, merge discussion.
I have opened a PR today, so just posted in the chat. So this PR is about invalid terminal block and the latest valid hash around it. There was an RFC that was mentioned in the PR. So it basically, this PR implements one of the options that is listed in the RFC. I would just so whoever not seen this RFC previously, just take a look at the PR. Like to merge it as soon as possible. And if there will be no opposition, probably will be merged next week. So take a look, please. It also, this PR is not only about replacing valid terminal block with like something, but it also covers a blind spot in the spec that has been discovered like months ago when I was like going through the list of checks to the engine API spec, and yeah, it also mentioned in the PR.
Gotcha. There's also other few PRs open that I believe will be merged very soon. There's based off of conversations in Dev Connect, there was 216 is open, which is a retake on the engine timeouts. And there's a couple of things related to error codes. So these will be bundled into a release, but if you're following them, you can probably, as they get merged, begin to make PRs against them. Other merge related discussions? No comment, Perry.
I mean, we did the easy stuff of figuring out that we need a testnet. Now we have to find the names.
I have a suggestion, but once you make a suggestion, you've now begun bike shitting names. So I will probably not make such a suggestion.
So you're saying the best way to troll right now would be to make a suggestion to kick off the conversation?
Yeah, I think we should sidestep naming them by giving them, just calling them what they are, the Robston Beacon Chain. But, now I've entered into that conversation. Okay. Anything y'all want to talk about with relation to the merge? Okay. Onward. I know there's lots of conversations that happen in the Discord. I know there's lots of conversations that happen with these issues, so it's understandable that we don't have a lot to talk about here. Moving on, where is my issue? Okay, any other client updates that people would like to share? This is going to be an easy call.
I'm a little bit curious if anyone else is awake besides the four of us.
I am awake.
The topics are just too good.
Yeah, I'm awake. I can give a quick update.
Okay, great.
So we released version 35 with lots of improvements, SSD, gossip sub, TCP5, and fixed some outstanding networking issues where we downscored peers without a reason. We also enabled proposer boost and deploy to mainnet. That's it.
Yeah, I'll also throw some stuff in. I think everyone's seen this, but Michael posted an issue about running fork choice before block proposals. I'll put it in the chat just in case anyone hasn't seen it, but it looks like everyone has. The other thing that we're roughly looking at is trying to, we've got a bit of pressure from the community to implement IPv6. So I'm not sure if anyone else is either looking at that or not, because I think IPv6 only nodes are going to segregate themselves. But anyway, that's something in our pipeline. I'm not sure if anyone's looked at that.
What is IPv6 is great. Why do your community members want it specifically?
Well, we're starting to get Gitcoin bounties. Specifically, they're saying that a lot of them have IPv6 only nodes behind, I don't know, some more involved infrastructure. And so they want IPv6 support, but I'm not entirely sure how that's going to play out, especially like when you're discovering other nodes that are mainly IPv4 and can't communicate to IPv6. So a lot of them have dual stack. So there's this kind of complication we have to kind of add into the lower protocols, which is what we're working through.
Got it.
Yeah, I can chime in as well. So Prism released version 2.1.1. This has the merge, so this has the merge support, also has Web3 signer support. We also have experimental with such activity sync support as well. It also enables proposer boost and has a bunch of nice vectorized SHA-256 optimization. So yeah, that's pretty much from us.
All right, we are quite focused on merge on the shadow fork testnets, but we are shipping one interesting feature that I'd like to share. Nimbus can now work in the Web3 signer setup in such a way that we connect to multiple remote signers and we obtain partial signatures from them, which are combined. This is similar to the secret shared validator setup. And it was actually requested by some staking pools, which have this concern that a lot of employees have access to the validator keys. So this creates a slashing risk from potential rogue employees. So in this configuration, it's possible for the staking pool to set up their infrastructure in a way where no employee have access to a full validator key. So that's a quite interesting feature. I think it's possible to extend the key manager API, for example, to add support for this type of configuration.
Got it. Thanks. All right. Any other client updates before we move on to some discussion points?
Yeah, so let's. Oh, yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So from Teco side, we have some optimization in the backlog around the transition, calculating the applying the transition. So we are the next release will include some optimization there. We are currently working implementing the builders APIs, and on the merge side, there are just minor things to improve, nothing important. That's it.
Yes, so that's from Grandina team. So apart from optimizations, we worked on ARM64 support, and also like some other teams on web signer support. And we, I would say, we probably have all the initial functionality of web signer, Web3 signer support. That's all.
Got it. Okay. Moving on. There's a couple of discussion points put in the chat. Age would like to discuss a potential upgrade for Gossip Sub called EpiSub. Age, what's the status on that spec? Is that actually a well-defined spec, or is there R&D to do to actually get it to an implementable place?
Yeah, so they like from 2 years ago, I think in like 2019, there was a planned upgrade from going from like flood sub, random sub, gossip sub, and then this final thing called EpiSub. And I've been looking into just the bandwidth that all our clients are using, trying to minimize it, which we've had discussions with various people about. In particular, I wanted to try and make like some of the mesh parameters a little bit more dynamic, or because we're seeing quite a few duplicates. But anyway, the concept of EpiSub is to make the mesh more efficient without having to change all that much about Gossip Sub. I talked to Viso, who's one of the main authors of Gossip Sub, and he was essentially saying there's very minimal modifications. So he essentially explained the modifications to me. I won't go over them in this call, but they're very minor. So there's some small changes we can do to Gossip Sub that would be backwards compatible that should make our meshes and stuff more efficient. The reason that it hasn't been spec'd out or built in LibP2P yet is because Gossip Sub seems to work for Filecoin and IPFS and everyone else using it. And no one really has the interest to kind of reduce the bandwidth. So I think the current plan is, given what Viso and I discussed, is for me to either give an implementation of these minimal modifications that we can then spec. And ideally, I'm chasing hopefully a Go developer to either mimic the implementation or copy or help me, I guess, I guess, yeah, copy whatever we build or in Rust and port it to Go, because they have a lot more kind of testing infrastructure in Go, so we can test this thing out before actually chuck it onto test nets. So it's essentially there's just some very small modifications to Gossip Sub that we can do that hopefully could have a big impact to our bandwidth usage by minimizing duplicates, making the mesh more efficient.
Is there anywhere that's a good source to read about this?
Yeah, so I think the answer is no. I went through and read all the previous specs for EpiSub and then reached out to Viso, and in the call that I had with him, he's just kind of like, I don't know, don't worry about all of that. We just have to do this, and it's all kind of small. So I can write up some documentation that people can read about if there's interest.
Yeah.
Just to get.
Go ahead, Nico.
Yeah, just to confirm, it's not what is proposed under EpiSub documentation in the P2P. I mean, you want to try some particular mechanics from this spec. It's not like implementing the spec, because when I was like reading it, I was under the impression that it's not yet like it's yet in an active research and was not implemented. Or is there any reference implementation for EpiSub?
Yeah, so the previous research was quite involved, and I think I've seen like there's some PRs or some issues around, and also a different kind of spec version. I kind of read through all of these, and the modifications are kind of scattered and convoluted, let's say. The actual changes that we would need that create what Viso calls an EpiSub is essentially we just add an extra control message. I'm not sure if I want to go into these details, but we keep the mesh the same size. And if we start seeing a number of duplicates from some particular node, we send like a choke message so that they stop sending us on the mesh and they only send us gossip messages. So it's just, it's more of like throttling the mesh, not changing its actual size. And this is just adding a single control message. This is not written anywhere that I've seen on the internet. It was only after the conversation that I had with Viso that this came out.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Well, I would be interested to stay in loop at least.
Okay, maybe if there's people that are interested in this, in particular, a Go dev, either just reach out to me, because I'll probably start doing a little bit of work on this, because if we can make it backwards compatible, then at least the nodes that are running this can get some bandwidth saving.
Cool, thanks, Age. Any other questions or comments for Age before we move on? And I presume once we got this into a Go implementation, we might want to run it through the gamut like Gossip Sub v1.1 was under all those different attack scenarios.
Yeah, that's the main reason I want a Go version and a Go dev to kind of help out, because we don't have that in Rust yet.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Moving on. Light Client wanted to discuss the Builder API status. Light Client, can you give us a status update?
Yeah, so a couple update points and then a few questions. We talked about the Builder API a bit on All Core Devs last week, and I wanted to get an idea of how important it was for validators to still control the gas limit that they want their blocks that they will propose to target, even if they're not performing the production of the block. And the overwhelming answer was yes. So we extended some of the signed messages to also sign over a preferred gas limit that the builders should adhere to. And there was a small discussion within that about whether they should be signing over the gas target or the gas limit, because after 1559, the actual independent variable is the gas target. But because most clients today still take a gas limit to target what the size of the block will be, we ended up going with the gas limit there. We've had a lot of feedback in general on the Builder API PR, which is in the execution APIs repo. And I think a couple of things have come out of it. most notably, some teams started implementing it, and they felt that there was a lot of work going into redefining the serialization schemes for beacon types that need to go over the JSON RPC methods that was originally proposed, and there was a request to pivot that API to the HTTP REST style that the beacon API is using. So it seemed like all the people in the block construction channel were okay with this pivot. And so I've started rewriting the API in that style and hopefully have that done in the next couple of days. The core logic will be the same, but people who have a lot of experience working in the Beacon API and the Open API format would love to have some feedback to make sure that the style is consistent with the Beacon API and all those other things. So I'll post some more information about that in the next couple of days when that's available. A couple of questions. One is, right now these things have been living in the execution API's repo. It doesn't really feel like that's the right place. And I don't know if anybody has an objection for this living in its own repo, maybe the builder API's repo under the Ethereum organization. Is that something that seems like a reasonable home?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that this isn't necessarily something that like an execution engine or an EL client implements.
Right.
It's another piece of software. You had suggested builder specs instead of builder APIs. The builder specs repo does exist. I could probably rename it.
Oh, it does. Oh, no, okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's like the builder API or the API's postfix has been used for these specific specs.
Right.
And the specs postfix has been used for like markdown. It feels like we kind of need both. Like there's still some specification related things, but we can talk about that offline.
All right, cool.
There's a pending
admin here after the call.
Okay, thanks. There's a pending PR right now to the Beacon API's repo into the prepare beacon proposer method. I'm wondering what needs to be done to keep that moving, because it's been sitting now for maybe a week and a half. And I think that's like the main thing on the critical path for consensus layer clients to implement so that we can actually get these non-consensus messages signed by the validator keys.
Is this 206?
Yeah.
I can just review it right after. It seems like there's been a lot of comments here. Was there anything contentious lingering in here?
I don't think it is.
Client teams to look at it because it's primarily.
I think the main question that's a little contentious is people feel it's weird to have an optional element on this method. That was something that came out of the discussion in Amsterdam. I really don't have a preference whether this is a new method or an optional add-on to this existing method. I just want to go down a route. Other than that, does anybody have additional comments or feedback on the builder API or the timeline that we're on? It feels like this is something that should be integrated into merge testing right now, and we're still at the speccing stage. So I don't know if people are worried about this or anything.
You said proposers will provide a gas target, and then the builders should respect that. Did you mean must?
They will provide a gas limit, and the builders should adhere to it. I mean, I don't know, the builders can do what they want, but the validators will, don't have to build a block if the builder doesn't adhere to theirs.
I see. So it should, in the sense of, if you want your block to actually be picked up, you should probably do this.
Right. But again, like if you earn double the rewards through external blocks, you might be coerced into just going along with whatever limit they choose. I think defaults are really powerful there, but it's something.
Is there a reason to not make that a must? To kind of remove that vector of like bribing
We don't have the
proposal. Well,
We don't have-
you sorry, go ahead.
We can put it as must in the spec. That's fine.
Yes,
It's just that there's no way to actually enforce it.
Right. But yeah, if you put it as a must in the spec and you put it as a must in the software release, then it does raise the
For
technical
sure.
bar slightly to like
Yeah.
bribe people this way.
Yep. And that's definitely what we'll do.
And also, if it goes signed, we can a posteriori backward slash you on protocol.
Backward slash who? The builder?
Well, the proposer that actually signed the block that didn't include his limit, his gas limit. Now we can.
Well, the thing
in the future we might.
But the thing is that I could just, as a proposer, go back and sign some message that says, oh, right before I proposed my block, I actually updated my preferred limit. And there's no way, because these aren't posted on chain, there's no way for the network to say, oh, I didn't see that, or I did see that.
We can say that if, we can assert that if we see two signatures for the same block with different limits, that you are in violation. And we reserve the right to.
But it's not per block. It's the validator basically registers with the external builder network by saying, this is my public key, this is the fee recipient address I would like to receive, and this is the gas limit I prefer my blocks to be built towards.
Gotcha. Okay.
Also, we should like take into account that the gas limit may be like say 10,000, I don't know, gas higher than the current gas limit, and in this case, what builders should probably like increase the gas limit as much as possible towards the gas limit announced by proposer, right?
Exactly. Any other general comments or feedback on the status of the Builder API? Do client teams feel like this is something that they're going to have the ability to implement in the next couple of weeks, assuming that we have a spec and some testing infrastructure available in the next 10 days?
Does this only need to be implemented consensus layer, or is there consensus and execution layer things that need to be done?
The execution layer things that need to be done is really in the hands of the external builders who, you know, right now it's mainly Flashbots. And so they have people working on things implementing that interface. I'm working on a testing implementation in MergeMock so that people who are implementing this have something that can respond to requests against. But it's not expected execution layer teams will implement this.
But locally, from like a market, from accessing the market, just a beacon node for a node that has validators on it is communicating to this like market mechanism, and it uses its local EL to just be processing things. There's no local EL communications to the market.
So I encourage all clients except for Prism to integrate this.
Hey, the
that'll solve our problem real fast.
Yeah. The distribution's looking much more reasonable. On one website, Lighthouse entered the quote yellow zone because it looks like they might be a third of the network now. So.
I guess one last question. Oh, go ahead, Danny.
No, that's fine. I'll have a question after yours.
Okay, I guess one other question for me is there is a situation right now where there's no way to compare a block I get from the external network versus my local EL.
I was just about to say this.
And so I'm curious what client teams are interested in doing about this, because I think the right thing to do here is obviously return some value field in the execution payload that's responded by the get payload. I think maybe we're too late in the game to have that change, but it still seems something that's important to have some heuristic for CLs to figure out if the relays are just giving you blocks that say they're only going to pay you 0.01 ETH, and just the basic tip from the EL block would be higher. That would be a good start.
Yeah, it's like for multiple reasons you should always build in parallel because one, you don't want to be hosed by the relayers, and two, you
Right.
want like a backup in case the relay just fails. I
Yeah,
guess
definitely.
You can do the latter, but you can't do the former. Can you utilize the ETH API to actually get this information, or is that not realistic?
I mean, I think CLs can do whatever they want.
Right. So
It's
can CLs get the fee difference via using the ETH API?
sure.
The problem is that
Yeah,
it will
if they-
not. It will have to. It will have to have executed block before doing this request.
Right, but it's constructed the block already. Like I'm assuming it's asking it at the point that it's already received the payload.
If I understand correctly, the constructed block is not like added to the chain, to the canonical chain automatically by EL. I might be wrong.
You're right.
So there's no way to query against that state if it's not in the canonical chain.
No, but you can execute the block as, for example, trace call or something.
Right.
But how does the CL, like, what exactly would that look like? How would the CL say execute that block hand wavy? That one. Like, what does it mean to execute that block? Like, to execute the pending block?
Execute the block it received as a payload from its EL. Like it's about to propose. It told it in the fork choice updated, it's about to propose. It got a payload, and now it's trying to figure out how much is my fee recipient going to earn from proposing this payload.
Would the CL have to then send the whole block again just to get the balance?
I think that would be the only way right now to get the full picture of how much was earned. I think you can statically do it by just going through the list of transactions, figuring out how much gas each transaction executed and checking the tip, but that doesn't account for Coinbase payments.
Sure, but even that would require you to still re-execute everything. It feels, I don't know, maybe execution layers have lots of headroom and doesn't matter if they execute.
Well, you can figure out the gas used without re-executing. It's already been executed. I guess you might have to get the receipts though, which if you can't query
that given to the CL?
I don't think that's given in the current return of get payload.
Right. So I think what we have right now, if the execution layer didn't do anything, like the best case scenario is you would have to execute things again because we don't surface the information that we need, right?
Right.
But executing a block will cause a delay, and there is like if CL will make a decision after executing the block, query the state, it probably will just miss the opportunity to propose timely block. Like it reduces the amount of time to propose a block.
Sure.
And disseminate it over the network. I would suggest the thing that we have discussed on DevConnect, to have a get payload v2, and see how it can be implemented. Probably it can be implemented even pre-merge or like shortly after the merge. I don't think we need like a hard fork to release this feature, so it could be a bit independent.
Yeah, I was gonna say spec it as a v2 and not have it on the most critical path to get out in the merge. Assuming relayers don't hose you, we could also run, some sort of sentry node to see if the relayers are acting nefarious here, and expedite v2 if needed.
Sounds good.
Currently,
I think that's it.
Currently on,
sorry, go ahead.
If a CL is unable to reach the relayer today, will it correctly execute its own block? Or at least defend it against that?
That is allowed in this design, and I hope that that's how beacon nodes are being constructed. Like you should always build one in parallel, but you wouldn't be able to, once you get from the relay and once you get from local, to know which one was more valuable.
I was wondering if there's any sort of like, should we give like timeout in second for like recommendation? If you don't get a reply back within this time, you should just go with your own block. Versus, because it's pretty easy if you get an error run. If you get an error, then you can just use your own block. But then if they take so long to respond, like how long do you wait for?
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense to add recommended timeouts there. On the order of what we're having in timeouts for like requesting a payload from your execution layer, which is like 1 second.
It should be a local request, right, to MEV boost, so it should be relatively fast.
Right, but MEV boost is making requests external. Relay your request. It's making external requests and then making a decision on which block is most valuable and stuff.
Yeah, and before it's like we have this delivery from builders over P2P, like a delivery of payload headers in advance. Yeah, we can't expect that it will happen immediately, right? I mean that this request will be resolved immediately, responded with a header.
That's all I have for the Builder API information. We'll try and cut a release for this with the HTTP style sometime mid next week. So keep an eye out.
Great, thanks. Okay. Other research spec or other discussion points for today?
I would like to, I mean, we're out of time, but I would like to continue the IPv6 discussion if possible, like in Discord later, perhaps.
We're not out of time, but we can also continue that in Discord unless you have something in particular you want to talk about.
I just wanted to discuss it more. So, like, it seems like a legitimate problem. Like, if there really are people that are running IPv6 only, I'm concerned that we could end up with a network partition pretty easily if we don't have enough nodes that can speak both IPv6 and IPv4. So, for example, if one minority client implements IPv6 only support and no one else, and everybody else is IPv4 only, then that could very easily lead to a partition.
Right. I believe IPv4 support is a must in the phase 0 P2P spec, in terms of the client needing to be able to implement it.
Sure. So the client can support it, but that doesn't mean the user on some particular network has access to IPv4, right? It's like if we are actually living in the future where there exists people who only have IPv6 access, the question becomes: do we want to give them good guarantees that they will be able to connect to the network and stay connected, or do we want to say if you're on IPv6, you're on your own, you may get partitioned off, and we don't care?
Yeah, I believe the spec's written in a way that we do care. But the actual nuance of how this is coming out of production is maybe that's not great.
Perhaps a starter to the discussion then is just how many clients support IPv6, like just in their client today?
I mean, I think you can set an IPv6 like listening address and kind of get TCP connections, but discovery is a whole other thing that we're kind of currently working on.
I see.
So you have you have IPv6 in the sense that like the libraries you're using and everything support IPv6, but currently discovery doesn't. Is that correct?
Yeah, so inherently with libp2p and TCP, you can have an IPv6 listening address, so you can set up TCP connections. But yeah, discovering nodes, the way that ENRs, so ENRs are kind of defined, you can have an IPv6 port and an IP and a UDP, and an IPv4 port, and then I guess you have to decide whether you're going to put them in your local routing table and advertise them, and then if you have one that has both, which do you connect to? You have to kind of make these kinds of decisions.
Gotcha. Any other clients have IPv6 support in some fashion? Take that as just the one. And which client is that, Age?
Lighthouse.
Okay. Do any other clients have plans on adding IPv6 support?
I believe we have it in Teku, but it's not something that we actively test or anyone is using, as far as I know.
Yeah, I believe like Go libp2p is going to have a lot of baseline support, but doesn't necessarily play nicely with how discovery is working.
So for the merge, is this something that we care about, or are we okay at merge time being kind of under the risk of a network partition between v6 only and v4 only nodes? Possible.
Yeah, I think we're going to try and avoid not releasing this kind of stuff before the merge.
Right, but I don't know why the point of the merge increases risk of partition here. Age, the issues with discovery would exist on the existing proof of work network as well, right?
Yeah, I mainly just because the changes are quite involved, especially in discovery. So I kind of don't want to make any massive changes just before we do the merge.
Right. So status quo is not going to induce additional risk of how the network is structured today, but altering it might. So we should do it after the merge.
That's my thinking, yes.
Got it.
So we should probably let the people who are asking for it know that, at least, just to set expectations. Just tell them, hey, we're working on it, but while you may be able to make something work in some client, you also make it partitions.
Yeah, we will do. We're still trying to figure out the best way to make some of these just, I don't know, preferences, I guess, or biases in discovery before I tell everyone how an IPv6 only node would work on the network, whether it's going to be by itself or whether it can, like, find some dual stack thing and connect. But yeah, we will inform the people that are asking.
Cool. Anything else people want to discuss today? Perry, are we going to be doing another shadow fork soon?
Yep, next week. I'll make some announcements tomorrow or today.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, in that case, we will close the call and take the rest of the discussions to the internet. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.